But again, it's an honor to be here. Tonight we're going to be looking primarily at 1 Peter 3:15. But I'd like to start with just being clear about a couple of things. You're probably all familiar with the word apologetics by now. It's related to our word apology, but it doesn't mean anything like our word apology. It comes from a Greek word meaning a reasonable defense, and it's connected with legal defenses. And I want to start tonight in the same way I start my apologetics class, and that's with a confession. I hate apologetics. All right? Which is unfortunate. I'm going to explain that a little bit. But it's unfortunate because we are commanded in Scripture to be prepared to give a defense of our hope. 1 Peter 3:15, the second part of it says, but in your hearts, well, the whole thing, but in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy. Always being prepared to make a defense. And that's the Greek word apologia, from which we get our word apologetics. Always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. C.S. Lewis was born in 1898. When he was young, he received a classical education. And that classical education drove him from the Christianity of his childhood. How? Well, he was told by his teachers, his professors, that Christianity was a story about God that was true, and that the pagan myths were false. Rather than strengthening his belief, this led him into atheism. He loved the pagan myths. He eventually became a Christian, of course, again, largely through the affirmation of the value of pagan myths. And I tell you the story of C.S. Lewis because it echoes a problem we are dealing with in our society. Lewis loved the pagan myths because he found within them something rich, something moving, something that touched him in a powerful way. He found them to be full of meaning. They inspired him to greatness. I struggled with the same sort of issue when I was young. When I was in high school, I was a leader of my youth group and so on and so forth, so I decided to go to college and study to be a pastor. I studied the Bible, I studied ministry, I was on fire for God, and then I started learning more and more about Christianity. And the fire began to die. Christianity became less and less inspiring. By the time I graduated from college and I had a pastoral job offered to me, I was in a terrible place. I didn't even care about God. I had fallen to the animal-like existence of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. The only thing holding me in place was fear. Fear of hell, fear of shame, of leaving Christianity when everybody thought I was a great person. So I did the logical thing. I turned down the job and I went to seminary. I wanted desperately to figure out that thing about Christianity that's supposed to stir up our passions and desire for God. Where is the meaning in Christianity? Where is that bit of knowledge or that experience that can fill me with hope and purpose and drive to be a better person, to be great, to be heroic? See, Christianity is true, but we really don't see much meaning in it. And I'm not talking about the few of you or the few of us who are backsliders or have had times of being backslidden. I think even the best of us tend to find Christianity, mere Christianity, basic Christianity, somewhat empty. That's why we try to get our fun add-ons to Christianity, right? We become KJV-only evangelists. That's the key. That's what Christianity is about. We become really passionate about secondary or tertiary issues of doctrine. Perhaps the precise causal relationship between God's power and human freedom. Maybe we seek the emotional side. We get as passionate as possible in a worship service, thinking that if we get stirred up over our favorite song, that'll make Christianity deep and rich. Maybe we throw ourselves into defending Christianity against other perspectives. Maybe we close our eyes to the world, cover our ears, and just yell, faith, faith, faith. It's all about faith. It's just faith. Maybe we get obsessed about end times. Well, that's the real Antichrist, right? I don't know if it's Obama or Trump, but it's one of them, right? Depending on your perspective. Some new event is the sign of the coming end. We become obsessed with add-ons to Christianity. Because basic Christianity, the core parts of Christianity, they don't seem to have much excitement in them. They're pale and dull before the objects and the stories and the purposes that worldly approaches offer. 5 or 6 years ago, a movie came out called Avatar. Anybody, have you seen Avatar? The one with the tall blue people with the tails? Okay. So it was about these people called the Na'vi who lived on the planet Pandora. And there's a bunch of bad humans trying to mine the planet to death. I remember it being reported that many who had seen the movie struggled with depression afterward. How many of you struggled? I'll make you raise your hand for that one. Because they were so moved by it that they wished desperately for it to be true. On a CNN website, there's an article about this. And it reads as follows. James Cameron's completely immersive spectacle Avatar may have been a little too real for some fans, who say they have experienced depression and suicidal thoughts after seeing the film, because they long to enjoy the beauty of the alien world Pandora. Now, if you look at the comments of the people, what people wrote on various websites, most of them expressed their depression by saying that all they could think about was living like the Na'vi, people who are quite literally linked together in community, who lived in harmony with their world and with each other. And their world was wild and beautiful. Now, we might chuckle at such people, but this says something about us as humans. We are drawn to stories. We're drawn to heroes, to worlds full of wonder and beauty. I bet that you yourself have had moments like this, where you've heard a story of immense richness and beauty and power and wished somehow that that story were true and that you could be a part of it. Perhaps some of you liked the movie 300. Maybe you liked the heroic film Braveheart. Maybe you liked, The Notebook or Twilight. I hope nobody liked Twilight in here. Jesus still loves you. So, maybe you've been drawn into some sort of story that you really love, and you wish that it were true, and you wish that you were part of it. I grew up reading fantasy and science fiction. That was my entire life when I was a child. Just reading and dreaming about that kind of world. But truly great stories that are not simple entertainment, whether a book or a film or a TV show, it's not the stories that are just fun and funny. The ones that they don't really have any preachiness in them. When you see them, you feel different. You desire to actually be a better person. You want to be able to do something great, to help those who need help, to be courageous and good. You may even desire that there could be some kind of timeless cause for which you could sacrifice your life. And Christianity doesn't feel like that. The story's worn out. The doctrines are dry and dead. We talk about love and grace, but it comes out sounding like law and obligation. We talk about God's glory and His presence with us, but He seems distant and dull. Or perhaps even worse. Let me offer a cynic's view of Christianity. Christianity is a set of doctrines that teach you that you are worthless and evil, that your desires are all messed up, and God despises you so much that He had to kill His own Son in order to get over His anger at you. And if you accept this free gift, you will be called to become a really boring person who tries to avoid all the yummy stuff of life. The excitement, the passion, the complexity, the beauty, and the glory of life in this world, for these are all in vain and they're sinful. And one day you will live eternally with this all-powerful and all-knowing killjoy, which is only slightly better than being tortured for eternity. I think many of us, if we would look deeply within ourselves, in those dark places that were too fearful to peer, would find that we kind of wish Christianity weren't true. How free we might feel. How much more motivation would we have for greatness? Perhaps you would exchange Christianity for an opportunity to become an X-Man, or an Avenger, or a Jedi, or just someone heroic, like Leonidas or William Wallace. Or maybe even a tall blue Na'vi living on Pandora. How we wish for these stories to be true and to be a part of them, and yet we are stuck with this story. It's Christianity, the true story. Where we're called to be nice, to get up early on Sunday morning, to give away our money, to come on Sunday night, to obey and be quiet unless we're saying the church answer to a question. We're supposed to read our Bibles and pray, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual stuff, like having a lot of fun on Friday night. To be a hero is simply to stop sinning so much or to visit someone in the hospital, but what we want is a great cause. We want to save the world. We want our heroism to be worthy of song, worthy of making a film about. We want a sense of purpose that moves us to do something great, but all we got is this call to be boring. If the great life is Coca-Cola, Christianity is an off-brand diet drink. It's dull, it's tasteless, giving a poor attempt at mimicking the true sweetness of the world, what the world offers. You see it in how bad Christian movies are compared to the Hollywood blockbusters, right? All right, I need to change the tone before you get your pitchforks and your torches. The problem I've laid out is really rather simple. And it's not a problem with Christianity. It's a problem with us. There's little hope to be found among Christians. And this is why I don't like apologetics. I have to try to teach a bunch of Christians who are almost invariably in some sort of despair. I have to teach them how to defend their despair. To people who seem to be having more fun. Their beliefs seem to have about as much effect on their happiness as their belief about whether Pluto is a planet or not. Now, hope is an amazing and complex attitude. Scholars, both Christian and non-Christian, have attempted to study it and write about it, to explain what it looks like when someone has it. Joseph Pieper, who is a Christian, has written that hope is not simply a belief, but it's an experience of being on the way toward blessedness. It's an experience of being on the way toward beatitude or blessedness. What's that supposed to mean? Well, think of yourself as a young child. If you are a young child, just think of yourself. You're sitting at home on a Friday evening. Nothing is different than any normal day. No bags are packed. There's no excitement in the air. Dinner is in the oven, and your parents say to you, "We're going to Disney World." You may be excited, you may be interested, but you know that you're not on your way to Disney World. There's no evidence that it's going to happen. You know perhaps that you'd better be a good child or they may cancel the trip. But that's about it. Nothing has changed. You don't know when it's going to happen. You're just getting ready for dinner like any other day. Now imagine you're that same child. But you come home from school on a Friday and you find the bags packed. The car is running, your parents toss you in the car, you start driving, and as you turn onto the highway, your parents turn to you and say, "We're going to Disney World." That's the sense of being on the way. Each moment takes on meaning. Every mile passed, every bit of squirming because you're trying to hold in your peace, you don't have to stop so often. All this suffering and even boredom is filled with purpose. You're going to Disney World. You're a kid with a bad sense of time, and so you have no idea how long it will take, but you know that every moment brings you closer. Every second is one bit closer to Disney World. You see the movement. You see the scenery changing. You're on the way. Now, is Christianity more like the first situation or the second situation? Well, I think most of us, while we may say it's like it's the second situation, we feel like it's the first situation. We are sitting around, the world looks the same, we look the same, we're just waiting for Christ to return. We're not on the way except in the sense that we're all getting closer to death. We know that we have to remain good boys and girls, otherwise we may not really be saved, or we may lose our salvation depending on how you See that relationship? But we don't know anything else. So we bide our time having as much fun as we think we can get away with without having our trip to heaven canceled. But we don't have any sense of getting any closer. We're not on the way. But that's not hope. In fact, that's a shrunken and distorted view of Christianity. Christianity is more like the second situation. We are on the way to blessedness. But what is that supposed to look like? What does it look like for us to be on the way? Well, that all depends on what we mean by the word blessed. We often limit ourselves to a small view of being blessed. We're blessed when things perhaps go well for us, right? And while that understanding of blessed isn't really wrong, it's not nearly enough. It's nice to get stuff. But getting stuff doesn't fill us with hope. It just pleases us for a moment. So what would truly bless you? I want you to think about that for a second. What would truly bless you? What would truly fulfill you? And don't give me the answer my students give when they don't know the answer. They just say Jesus and hope it's the right answer, right? I'm not saying that that's necessarily the wrong answer, but I want you to think about it. I want you to think about it in terms of what would the experience be like? What kind of thing would you have to have, or what kind of thing would you have to be doing for you to really feel fulfilled? Jesus said in John 10:10, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. So what are those situations in which you feel like you are so full of life that you can hardly sit still? That you can hardly contain yourself? I bet none of you feel like that right now. Except me, maybe. Let me tell you the right answer, though it's hard to do. It is when you are doing something meaningful and you're doing it well. Right? It's when you are doing something that feels perfect for you. It's like what you were created for. And you feel the excellence when you were doing it. Eric Liddell, the great runner and missionary depicted in the 1981 film Chariots of Fire. Anybody seen Chariots of Fire? A couple of you. Not as many as Avatar. He said this, I believe God made me for a purpose, but He also made me fast. And when I run, I feel His pleasure. That's what I mean. That's what I mean by an abundant life, and that's what I mean by blessed. And I think that's what Jesus was talking about. But our society is consumed with pleasure-seeking and the avoidance of pain. The problem is we are too. Right? We're really focused on getting pleasure and avoiding pain, but we do it in the Christian way, which means we just have a little less pleasure and maybe suffer a little bit more. By coming to church on Sunday night. It is no wonder that we feel like we are living half lives, always fighting our cravings for what we cannot have. We are boring, we are mundane, we're insipid, we're tasteless, we're dull. Christ did not come to make us so empty. That's not His purpose. He came that we might have abundant life, not abundant stuff, not abundant pleasure, but abundant life. What's wrong with pursuing money and fame and all the pleasures the world offers? Let me tell you a secret. It's not because money is bad. It's not because pleasure is bad. It's not even because being famous is bad. What's wrong with pursuing those things is that they can't fulfill you. God doesn't tell you not to pursue those things because He's a killjoy. He tells you not to pursue those things because you're never going to be happy if you go that route. Let me tell you why they can't fulfill you. Let me try. Bear with me. We're going to go into a little bit of a strange philosophy stuff. Not too strange. Think of it like this. You are full of a huge bundle of desires. And they're all fighting for supremacy in your life. Right? You feel this. At one time you give in to this desire, and then another time you give in to this desire, and then you hate yourself over it, and then you're happy, and so on and so forth, right? You want six-pack abs, and you want that Cinnabon. Which one wins? You want to get a better job, but you hate filling out job applications. Which desire is going to win? We are constantly at odds with ourselves. We're divided against ourselves. We're at war with ourselves. But think of a hero in a great film. What is a hero like? Does the hero get confused and unfocused, running after this desire and then after that desire? No. Because the hero has a purpose. And that purpose crowds out all those desires. It doesn't really even crowd them out, but focuses them into one direction. Not the band. In fact, whenever the hero pursues some side desire, we condemn him for failing, for imperiling his overriding purpose, right? Don't run off after that thing. Don't go after the siren call. Stay focused on your purpose. And there's something about taking those steps, that the hero's steps toward that end goal. Every single step you take, it makes the call of pleasure and the fear of pain weaker and weaker. The hero walks, almost without flinching, through the terrible and fearful enemies, ignoring the saccharine calls of safety and comfort and pleasures. He has his purpose. His desires are not at war anymore. They're all aimed in a single direction. And they obey. They act in harmony because he's on the way. He doesn't need to fight his desires anymore. For what they really want is the goal, which is always drawing closer and closer. Are you with me? That's what hope is. It rids us of the chaos of our desires. It directs them all toward a purpose, and we see ourselves coming closer and closer to this goal, and as we get closer, the temptations become weaker. Our fears begin to lose their strength. Anxiety weakens because we no longer hate ourselves over the various desires that are at war within us. We're not bored. We don't despise our lives. Rather, we begin to overflow. That is abundant life. That is hope. And it's what Christ has offered us, and yet so few of us have it. I think if we're honest with ourselves, very few of us have it. Now, perhaps you want me to tell you how you can get this hope. I tried to buy the Holy Spirit from someone once, but he complained about it. Told me to get away. Anyway, never mind. It's reference to Acts, anyway. But if you think there is a one-size-fits-all answer to getting hope, in terms of actual practical steps you can do, I don't think there really is one. You need Christ. That's the one-size-fits-all. But in terms of every individual, it might be different. But let me paint you a picture, an image to maybe attach to think about in terms of hope. Our hope relates to being in the presence of God, right? That's our hope, somehow to be in the presence of God. But the hope of being in the presence of God is not a matter of getting what we want. Or, heaven forbid, sitting in some celestial sanctuary singing hymns for eternity, right? Despite the fact that I enjoyed the hymn. To be in the presence of God is to become what we really are. We're not made to sit around squeaking out songs that we hate. We're not made to get big mansions and jewels for crowns. It's not what we're made for. We were made to rule. We were made to create. We were made to act, to live. To be in God's presence is for us to finally become whole, undivided, full to overflowing, bringing forth life and beauty and nobility and greatness. I don't know exactly what we'll be doing, but we're going to be doing things, carrying out great and noble deeds. I don't know what that looks like. I have my own ideas, but I don't want you to laugh at me. So Christianity is not about giving up the good stuff now in order to invest in an otherworldly retirement, where we can slowly wither away in inaction. It is about having an abundant life now, and a life that is so full that death cannot hold it down. And so this life will grow ever greater and ever greater throughout eternity. Remember the depression that hit people over Avatar, or your own attraction to countless heroic stories. Remember why C.S. Lewis turned away from Christianity early on in his life. All these sublime stories, not stories of good guys getting a bunch of pleasure and riches, that would be terribly boring and completely uninspiring. But even the tragic stories of valiant heroes falling before their enemies, these stories are the ones that stir us up. These are the stories that we desire to be real. We are not inspired by the idea of getting stuff. If your view of salvation is that you get stuff later on, don't be surprised that people are uninspired by what you have to talk about. We are inspired by heroism, of devotion, even in suffering, of love, even in the face of hatred, of hope, even in the face of despair. We are inspired by those who do great things when everything around them tells them to stop, to give up. Now, the stuff in those stories that inspires us is an echo of the truth. The truth reflected in each of these, that thing that makes us nostalgic for a world that we've never seen, of a life we've never lived. That's the very stuff of the gospel. No, we probably won't be tall blue people with tails, but we will see ourselves and become how Christ has made us. Saints, heroes, people who have been raised so high that we will even judge angels. Our acts, beautiful and glorious, will be like a song declaring the glory of God for eternity. Now, you may not feel like it, but we are on our way there. The world may not look like it, but that's where we're going. Let that hope fill you. The hope that you will one day find a fulfillment that will make your petty pursuits of pleasure here seem childish, like someone who plays with a Hot Wheels car when there's a Corvette waiting in the driveway. But I need to get back to 1 Peter 3:15. How are we to give a reasonable defense of this kind of hope? What does it even mean to give a reasonable defense of this kind of pursuit of heroism? That's a hard question to answer. It's not as simple as we often think. Surely hope depends wholly on the work of Christ and is directed toward presence with Him. But it still has a different flavor with each person. Maybe you love music, and you could find fulfillment in creating transcendently beautiful and sublime music for eternity. This is a good image for you. It draws together your desires into a set of actions that give you purpose. When you play the piano or the guitar, you feel a touch of transcendence, that divine mix of sadness and elation that tells you that you are standing on the edge of eternal fulfillment. But not everyone cares about music like that. So how are we supposed to talk to people about hope? How are we supposed to defend the hope that we have? Well, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 2, 1-5, "And I, when I came to you, brothers, did not come proclaiming to you the testimony of God with lofty speech and wisdom. For I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling, and my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God." Now, I'm afraid a lot of our arguments for Christianity are precisely attempts to get us to trust in God based on the wisdom of men. But Paul went to Corinth, insistent upon knowing nothing but Jesus Christ and Him crucified. What does that even mean, though? What does that mean? Well, consider this. Jesus Christ did not stand high atop some heavenly cloud and declare from a distance how we're supposed to live. No, He came among us, took on our nature. He lived in all the brevity and dirtiness and pain and loneliness of human life. And He spoke to those with Him who were with Him as friends, as a friend among them. And then when the world rose up against Him, what did He do? He stretched out His arms, forgiving them and dying for them. And His love and His humility and His heroism could not be kept down. He overcame death itself. Now, if you have hope, then like Jesus, you're not going to be concerned with stomping your enemies down. You will be among them. You will listen to them, as a friend would listen to them. You will see what fills their hearts, what desires are tearing them apart, what things they do that give them a taste, an echo of real hope. And you will speak and act to nurture those things. For every single human being, according to Augustine and according to the Bible, was created for God. And we will only be fulfilled in God. And every single thing in this world in which someone finds fulfillment is nothing but an echo, an arrow pointing to the one who will fulfill them. Now, in all this process, perhaps you'll have an opportunity to use the cosmological argument for God's existence. Perhaps you'll run up against the logical or existential problem of evil. Perhaps you'll need to offer a defense of the reliability of Scripture. And I commend you to read up on those things, to learn about that stuff. Because Christianity, there's a lot of smart people who have a lot of really good arguments for it. But really, more importantly than any of these things, is that you yourself start to be on the way toward blessedness. Live abundantly. Live in hope. And you'll find that the people you run up against are drawn to the hope that you have. And perhaps they'll begin to ask you, instead of you asking them. They'll ask you, what's so strange about you? That's where 1 Peter 3:15 comes in. When they ask you for the reason, now you're ready to give a reason because you're living it. Thank you.